Hey there, I'm Reverend Jim Keat. This is the whole Bible, the show where we go through the Bible from beginning to end. We are in Genesis chapter 37 through 41 today. We are almost at the end of Genesis. What? One more video coming next week. But here we are talking about Joseph. Now, we've been in this long line of patriarchs, fathers and sons, and this family tree from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, and now finally to Joseph. Now, Jacob had a whole lot of sons. 12 of them, to be exact, and Joseph is one of the younger one, although he was the son of his favorite wife, the firstborn son of his favorite wife. So there's a little bit of favoritism going on here. We'll get into some of that a little bit later. Now, when you think of Joseph, a lot of people probably think of something like this. This is how we often know the story, but the story isn't really about the technicolor coat. Although, if this first half of Joseph's story had a soundtrack, it would be this.
You may say I'm a dreamer.
Yeah, that's it right there. Thanks, John. That's a good soundtrack for the story of Joseph. So Genesis 37 through 41 introduces the Joseph narrative. We move the story of Israel's ancestors into a world of family drama, exploitation, migration, and political power. These chapters center themes of violence against the vulnerable, survival in oppressive systems, and God's presence with those who are betrayed, enslaved, or imprisoned. Now, scholars see these chapters as a tightly crafted narrative tradition that reflects Israel's historical memory of diaspora and God's surprising work within empire. We got a lot going on here. Basically, it brings us from these wandering nomadic tribes to Egypt, where the next book, Exodus, will pick up on a little bit. So a lot of Genesis is kind of this story of origins, story of beginnings. It's kind of the prologue to the action that begins in Exodus, which the question of the historicity of Exodus is one we'll talk about in the next round of Exodus videos. It's not very historical, but all that to say, Genesis is really setting the stage for the narratives we're going to pick up in Exodus. And this last part here with Joseph really gets us to Egypt with a character who pulls a lot of levers and has a lot going on, showing God's presence in the midst of all the things, because there are all the things here. So let's take a look at what we got coming up with these, 5 chapters. Genesis chapter 37 is betrayal and descent. This is where Joseph's dreams spark jealousy. He has these dreams of, grains of wheat bowing down to him, all these things, and it just happens to be the same number of brothers he has. So his brothers are a little bit jealous. This leads his brothers to betray him, sell him into slavery, and deceive their father. No, an animal killed him. Look at this beautiful robe you gave him, and it's all covered in blood. Now, the chapter exposes the deep fractures within the family and sets Joseph on a forced journey into Egypt. Now, a close reading of this chapter also shows some of the how did this story come to be questions, and was it possibly a couple different accounts that got merged together? There's a great video by Dan McClellan. I'll link it wherever videos go on YouTube. You can watch it. But thanks, Dan, for all your great work. And for this one especially, here's what Dan has to say. Just a little snippet.
Let's talk about another biblical contradiction. Who sold Joseph into slavery in Egypt?
Yeah, that's the thing Dan talks about. Now, the next chapter, Genesis 38, takes a slight shift from the Joseph narrative. We've seen this happen throughout these Genesis stories where we seem like there's the through line, the main story, and then suddenly we get a B plot. This would be one of those. This chapter is the story of Judah and Tamar, where Tamar boldly secures justice and her rightful place in the family lineage despite Judah's failures. Judah is the oldest son, by the way, of Jacob. We got these 12 kids. Judah is the firstborn. Joseph is one of the lastborn. So Judah, the firstborn, who's supposed to inherit the birthright and blessing and all that stuff, has this moment with Tamar. And Tamar's actions challenge patriarchal expectations and reveal God at work through marginalized women. Essentially, Tamar was married to Judah's son, and then that son died, so she married the next son, and that son died, and then she was supposed to marry the next son, but he was too young, so Judah's like, when he's older, and apparently, he was never old enough for Tamar. So Tamar took matters into her own hands and seduced Judah, dressed as a prostitute. And then it's a great chapter. We'll see a video on the summary. You should definitely read this one. This is talk about soap opera vibes. Genesis 38 is all over it. Then after that, we're back to Joseph. We're back to Egypt. This is Genesis 39. This is a bit more of where you're used to picking up the plot with Joseph. The Tamar story was one of those deep cuts that you probably didn't hear in Sunday school for a lot of reasons. But back to Joseph, Genesis 39. This is the story where Joseph earns trust in Potiphar's house, but is falsely accused and imprisoned after resisting sexual exploitation. Interesting, he is the one who resists. It's Potiphar's wife who comes onto him, because apparently he's really good looking, and he's like, no, this isn't right. Now, despite this injustice, God remains with Joseph. He's in prison, but he's enabled to preserve in the face of systemic oppression. Interesting having these two chapters back to back about sex and integrity and how you show up in the world. Interesting. Maybe that was on purpose that these two chapters were put side by side like that. All right, then we get to chapter 40, Dreams and Delay. This is where Joseph, still in prison, meets a couple friends, the Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, and they have some dreams. And Joseph's like, I think I know what they mean. And this reveals Joseph's ongoing prophetic insight. We're going to get this a bit more later. Now, the meaning of the cupbearer and baker's dreams, they're one's good, one's not so good. One of them ends up getting killed. The other one ends up getting restored back to his position. However, Joseph goes forgotten. This illustrates the slow and painful nature of liberation. What we want to happen quickly sometimes paces itself and goes at a bit slower of a beat than we might prefer. But then we get Genesis 41, Rise and Responsibility. Here we go. Now we're getting somewhere. We're still with Joseph, and he interprets Pharaoh's dream. So Pharaoh wakes up, can't figure out what these dreams mean, and the cupbearer is like, wait a minute. A few years ago when I was in prison, I had a dream, and this guy Joseph was there, and he interpreted it. Maybe Joseph's still there. Joseph is still there. So Joseph is the only one who can interpret Pharaoh's dreams. It's all about this upcoming famine and what we need to do to prepare for it. And so Joseph is the one who's put in charge of preparing for the upcoming famine. He rises to power. He devises a plan to save countless lives during the impending famine and make Egypt really rich along the way. Interesting how moments of crisis tend to be moments when the people who already had all the wealth get even wealthier. Can you think about who I'm talking about with that one? Now, Joseph's leadership demonstrates how marginalized people can transform unjust systems from within. There could have been a whole story where Joseph was the Moses character who's confronting the unjust systems, but Joseph's kind of the opposite of Moses. He's the one who stays within the seat of power. He doesn't kill one of the Egyptians and end up running off to the desert. That's Exodus. We'll get there in a few videos, don't worry. But Joseph transforms unjust systems from within. This also reveals the complexities of working within the empire. Is it possible to swim in these waters of injustice and work for justice along the way? Those are big questions, much bigger than this little video will answer. But stick around, we'll probably dive into those themes here and there and everywhere. All right, let's hear 5 fantastic videos talk about these 5 fantastic chapters. You're going to hear Reverend Amanda Meisenheimer talk about chapter 37. You get me for chapter 38, Reverend Brandon Robertson for 39, Reverend Dr. Colleen Burchett for chapter 40, and then I'm back again for chapter 41. Here we go.
Bible in a Minute, Genesis chapter 37. Following in the pattern of Abraham and Isaac, Jacob too has a favorite son. It's the son of his wife, Rachel, and his name is Joseph. He loves Joseph and gives him a beautiful coat. Joseph starts having dreams about his whole family bowing down to him, and all of this really enrages his brothers. And the brothers decide they're going to kill Joseph. One brother rescues him by saying, instead of killing him, let's throw him in a pit in the wilderness. That brother's name was Reuben. Reuben goes to retrieve Joseph from the pit and discovers that it's empty. His brothers have sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites, who then sell him to Egypt. But they have to tell Jacob something, so they bring back the coat dipped in blood and tell Jacob that the brother, Joseph, is dead. Jacob is inconsolable. How will he ever go on? Who cares about the other 11 brothers? Joseph is dead. Or is he?
Bible in a Minute, Genesis chapter 38. Judah has 3 sons. His firstborn marries Tamar, but he dies and they haven't had a kid yet, so in order for the family line to continue, the next brother has to fill in. But then brother number 2 dies. Brother number 3 is still a kid, but Judah tells Tamar that when he's old enough, they can get married. Only years later, Tamar sees that baby brother's all grown up, but Judah has not followed through on his promise. So she veils her face, pretends to be a prostitute. Judah picks her up from the side of the road, not knowing who she really is. Let's do this. What will you give me? How about a baby goat from my flock? Okay, but give me your signet and cord and staff. Later, Judah sends the goat, but the prostitute can't be found. And then 3 months later, scandal breaks out. Your daughter-in-law Tamar has prostituted herself. Moreover, she's pregnant as a result of the prostitution. Bring her out and let her be burned. She comes out holding the signet in court and staff. These belong to the father. He hadn't followed through on his promise with his youngest son, and so Tamar did what she had to do to ensure her safety. In a patriarchal society where women are treated as property rather than people, this is a story about a woman who controls her own fate.
Bible in a minute, Genesis chapter 39. In this chapter, Joseph is sold into slavery in Egypt and finds favor with Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials. Potiphar places Joseph in charge of his entire house, and God blesses Potiphar because he has cared for Joseph. But while Joseph is tending to his house, Potiphar's wife tries to sleep with him because he's apparently so handsome. Joseph persistently refuses, but one day Potiphar's wife grabs Joseph by his coat, and Joseph runs off naked. The wife makes a scene and tries to blame Joseph for trying to sleep with her. This is what she tells Potiphar when he refers home. So Potiphar has Joseph thrown into prison. But even in prison, God is with Joseph, and Joseph finds favor with the prison warden, who makes him in charge of the entire prison. He just can't lose. The point of this story is as simple as it gets. Do the right thing, and God will be with you. Short and to the point.
Bible in a minute, Genesis 40. Joseph was in prison for something he didn't even do, and he was forgotten. But Joseph already knew a God who could make a way out of no way. I can hear him now humming, "Hold on, just a little bit longer. Hold on, just a little bit longer. Hold on, just a little bit longer. Everything is gonna be all right." And Joseph experienced the power of God. Stay tuned.
Bible in a minute, Genesis chapter 41. Joseph is still in prison, but over in the palace, Pharaoh wakes from not one, but two startling dreams. The first is about 7 thin cows eating 7 healthy cows, and the second is about 7 thin ears of grain consuming 7 healthy ones. Desperate to know what they mean, he asks for someone to interpret them. The chief cupbearer recalls his time in prison 2 years ago, where he met someone with a knack for interpreting dreams. And so Pharaoh calls for Joseph. Joseph explains that the dreams foretell 7 upcoming years of abundance, followed by 7 impending years of famine. And he goes on to prescribe a solution. Take 20% from the good years, store it away, and then we'll have enough to make it through the 7 years that follow. Sounds like a plan. And since you're good with dreams, you'll be in charge of it. And so Joseph finds himself second in command over all of Egypt. The next 7 years go exactly as predicted, leaving all of Egypt and all the world to come to Joseph to buy grain. I wonder how this famine is impacting Joseph's father and his brothers. Okay, first thing first, what stands out to you? What do you notice? Notice what you notice. That's probably the most important thing you could ever do when reading the Bible, especially when you might read it a little bit slower than the speed read, drive-by Bible reading that we're so used to, where everything is skimmable. Everything doesn't have to be skimmable. Some things can actually be savored, enjoyed. Maybe like the Bible, like all these wonderful things, like a sunrise, a sunset, moments with your kids, people you love. Okay, I'm digressing. Let's go to some specific questions that might be helpful as we think about these chapters as well. First, how do family dynamics, favoritism, jealousy, communication failures shape this story in ways that resonate with real families today? Jacob and all of his sons, mainly all of the sons, they got a lot of things going on. Favoritism, jealousy, communication failures, all that stuff is here. And how do we see that still in our life, in our world, in our family systems today? How does Tamar's courage disrupt patriarchal injustice, and what does it teach us about marginalized resistance? Just sit with this question for a minute. You gotta go read this chapter here. It's a good one. And then this question. That deserves some real reflection. Next, what role do dreams and imagination play in maintaining hope in hard circumstances? Yeah, we still got hard circumstances, and I hope we have dreams and imagination. Last, what does it mean to navigate faithfulness while working within unjust systems? Because we've got plenty of those too. And how do we navigate faithfulness even from within? All right, leave your comments below with all your thoughts on these questions and anything else that stood out to you from all the stuff I said and all the stuff you saw. Next week, we have one final video to wrap up the book of Genesis. We'll be on Genesis 42 through 50, so it's a big one, but we got a lot of good stuff. The last half of Joseph. It's got some drama. The soap opera continues, and it's going to get good. So, I'll see you then.